자, 이건 또 뭐야? 미사일 전차, 다가오지 않았던 미래의 무기. 자, 창과 방패의 대결은 영원하다고 했던 군비 경쟁의 핵심이었습니다. 한쪽에서 강력한 무장을 개발하면 한쪽에서는 방어를 튼튼하게 합니다. 또는 구식 무기의 현대 포탄으로 새로운 생명을 불어넣는 방식도 존재했습니다. 20세기 중반까지 히트한 이러한 문제점을 단숨에 해결할 것처럼 보였다고 하는데 그 중심에는 ATGM이 있었습니다. 그러니까 주포 발사 미사일 뭐 이런 느낌이죠. 한번 봅시다.
What is stronger, a spear
창과 방패.
or a shield? That's the gist of the eternal
자,
arms
시선
race.
유도
While one
어떻게 보면
side
미사일
develops a
같은 거죠.
powerful gun, the other finds a way to make their armor
시상전
stronger.
할 때 좀
Or
재밌게도
gives
쓰긴
old
썼는데
weapons a new life with the
제가
help of
써본 것
modern
중에서
shells.
가장
By the
괜찮았던 거는
mid-20th century, though, it seemed like
그거
engineers
같은 거
cracked the code and found
BMP2M,
the ultimate
분포2M
way to
있잖아요.
defeat
그게
tank
제일
armor.
좋더라고요.
Heat
뭐
projectiles
같은
and
부류로
especially
다 넣어도 될지 안 될지
ATGMs.
모르겠는데 그거 진짜 좋았고요. 미국에서 쓰는 쉐리던도 나쁘지
Naturally,
않았어요.
militaries around the world started tinkering with the idea of creating a
쉐리던.
hybrid vehicle.
요거
For
그치
instance,
이거.
by mounting a missile weapons system on a well-protected
이게 좋은 게
mobile platform.
원래는 쏠라면
One of the
멈춰야
first ever
되잖아.
vehicles of this
근데
type was the
기동하면서 쏠 수 있었어.
M551 Sheridan,
BMP2도 그랬던 것
an
같아.
airborne assault
그게 그래서
vehicle
좋은 것
that the
같아.
US
멈춰서
military
쏘지
accepted into
않고
service
이동하면서
in
쏠 수 있는.
1966. It's important to note that it wasn't on a whim that engineers decided to fit this vehicle with a gun launcher combo. It was lighter than a conventional long-barreled cannon and offered more utility. In fact, the military were
그렇죠.
very
이거는
demanding with their
탄속이 중요한 건
requirements,
아니죠.
and the Sheridan met all of them
히트탄이나.
with flying
그러니까 화학탄이라
colors.
그죠.
But then Sheridans were shipped to Vietnam,
쉐리던
and the
베트남으로
war quickly
보내줬고
exposed the flaws of the gun launcher combo. To start with, the barrel had a service life of only 100
100발
rounds.
정도 쏘면은
It wore out several
수명이 다
times
됐다.
faster than a conventional gun.
마모가
Furthermore, the
심했다.
gun's tremendous recoil posed a significant challenge to the crew, sometimes even causing serious
심각한 부상을
injuries.
입히기도
What
했다.
about the
반동
Shillelagh
때문에.
missiles then? Well, in the beginning, there were simply no suitable targets for the Shillelagh in Vietnam. No one wanted to fire very expensive missiles at bushes or light tanks. In the end, the Sheridan had a lukewarm reception, but it wasn't completely discarded, as the infantry were desperate for direct fire support. After all, even a single HE shell fired from the Sheridan's gun could
다른
wreak
폭탄을
havoc in
쓰게
the enemy
됐습니다.
ranks. With time, some of the flaws of the Sheridan were addressed. In the late 1960s, there was even a plan to mount a
60년대
modified version of its gun on the experimental MBT-70, but the project was scrapped. The US military were undeterred, though, and a few years later accepted
MBT-70.
another, and their last, missile tank into service,
M60A2.
the M60A2. The difference between the regular M60 and the missile variant was that the latter featured a gun launcher and a unique low-profile turret with the gunner and loader located to the right and left of the gun. The new version of the launcher avoided
없어진 거
several
아닌가? 아직
problems of the
남아있나?
preceding models, like their tremendous
이건가
recoil,
뭐
but some
나왔다가
drawbacks
갑자기 쏙 들어간 거
remained, like having
있었거든요.
the very same
돌장비였는데.
combustible case charges that were highly flammable. The weapon
아브레
system was
같은 거,
also
영국의
very
아브레 같은 거
technologically
나왔다가
complex
싹
and
사라졌어.
extremely expensive to build and maintain. At the same time, the M60A2 was sitting in a pretty weird spot in terms of its combat role, somewhere between an MBT and a tank destroyer. Its reload times were way
메인
too
배틀
long
탱크와
to be the
구축
former,
탱크의 어느
and the
정도
vehicle
선에
was way
있다.
too expensive to be the latter. The USSR was also busy developing their own missile tanks. The Object
자체 미사일
775
개발하나?
was a very
바빴다.
unusual looking combat vehicle armed with a missile launcher. As trials showed, the
여기도
experimental
시선유도
missile
미사일이
tank could
있었던
achieve
거구나.
surprising
시선유도
levels of
미사일로 만들어진
survivability
건가?
thanks to its small size and a variable ride height
맞다.
system.
이거 실제
Just
어땠는지
imagine,
궁금하다.
a tank armed with a
이제 좀
125mm
그 뭐냐,
gun could
데이터가
have a
쌓였을 거
lower
아니야.
profile than a passenger
사기인지
car.
아닌지 별 말이
Soviet
없는 거
engineers
보면
achieved
크게
that by
문제가
fitting
없나?
the tank with a hydropneumatic suspension and placing the crew in a special
납작하니만.
compartment in the turret. Despite the fact that the overall complexity of the design and problems with reliability prevented it from entering production, the Object 775 was promising enough to warrant more extensive development. Eventually, there was a Soviet missile tank that made it into production. It was the IT-1, designed to fire Drakon missiles. The Soviet High Command were staunch believers in the devastating destructive power of this weapon system. At some point, there was even a suggestion to replace all conventional tanks with missile
이거는 좀
tanks.
상대를 많이
The
해봤습니다.
IT-1
제가
features a fully
그때 제가
rotating
지상할 때
turret and a
있었거든요.
stabilizer.
짜증났어. 잘 타는
It
사람은
also
진짜 잘
inherited
타고
its armor and
못 타는
chassis
사람은
from a
진짜 못
time-tested
타고
MBT.
너무 이게
The vehicle
복불복이야.
was accepted into service in 1968, but was pulled out after just 2 years of
2년 만에
service.
다시 단계
The dead zone
폐지됐다.
around the tank created by the missile's minimum range made it very vulnerable in close quarters combat. And a number of design flaws made the military very concerned with the vehicle's overall
그리고
reliability.
요즘에는 장갑차에도 보통 이제 뭐 미사일 올리는
France was also
편이죠.
an active
대지차
participant
미사일.
in this race. The country spent a lot of money and almost 10 years developing the project called the Acra, or
옵션
Anti-Char
파츠처럼 뭐
Rapide
뗐다
Autopropulsé.
뺐다 그러잖아.
To be fair, the result was
장착해서
pretty impressive. It took
할
the
수도
Acra
있고
missile less than
안
7
뺄 수도
seconds to
있고.
cover a distance of 3 kilometers. And the MUC rocket-assisted round could be used to hit targets at a distance of up to 8 kilometers.
8km를
Ultimately, the
공격하죠.
project was abandoned.
그치, 그
as missiles
요거
used by the
시선유도
weapon
요
system could
미사일
not
쏘는
be
게
fitted
좋은
on
점이 헬기
helicopters and
잡기
were
은근히
prohibitively
괜찮아.
expensive.
짜증나거든.
The
위치만
AMX-30
알면.
variant fitted with the Acra weapon system ran into the same problems as the IT-1 and the M60A2. There were too many technical complications to use it as an MBT, and it was way too pricey for a tank destroyer. There was also the
가격이 너무
AMX-10M,
비쌌습니다.
based on an
AMX-10에.
IFV chassis, but it didn't make it anywhere either. And then it was the mid-1970s already.
그치,
And the
이것도
interest
새로
in
나오고 난 다음에
specialized
어떻게
missile
됐는지
vehicles started to wane. But the eternal arms race of weapons versus armor went on. In order to protect vehicles against HEGMs and heat projectiles, engineers started fitting tanks with blocks of explosive reactive armor. Then other engineers came up with the idea of
과학탄의
tandem charge
극상승인
missiles and
그
weapons
반응
with
장갑이
top
나오면서
attack capability, like the TOW-2B.
과학탄은 이제 별
By that
문제가
point, pure missile tanks
크게
became a thing of
효용을
the
못
past,
갖게 됐죠.
but they were not completely forgotten.
심지어 요즘에는
Soviet
반응
engineers
장갑은
developed special guided
물리탄도
weapon systems for their
이제
high
막잖아요,
caliber
그죠?
guns,
어떤
including the
메커니즘인지
reflex
모르겠지만
used on the T-80 and the Bosnia for the BMP-3. Chinese arms makers also kept developing weapon systems of this type. For instance, the tanks of the ZTZ-99 series, the wheeled ZLT-11, and the WMA-301 assault gun all can fire missiles. At the end of the day, missile tanks fulfilled a very niche role. They were way too expensive and sophisticated for
그러고
fire
보면 지금
support,
현대
but not
전차들이
versatile enough to replace
이제 다음
MBTs. As a
단계가
result, vehicles
개발돼야
of
돼.
this
너무
specific
옛날
type
거죠. 우리나라가
effectively
그게
became just a
최신이죠.
footnote of military history. But in War Thunder, they get their chance to shine.
웃긴 게
The IT-1, the
다른 나라로 뭐 한 거지?
Starship, the AMX-30
웃기죠.
Acra, and other
일본
missile
보니까
tanks are
요즘
waiting for
평화에
you at the highest
젖어가지고
ranks
뭐
of the ground
바보
forces
됐고.
tech tree. What do you think
그나마
about
이제
these
우리
peculiar
서구권에 남은 건
vehicles?
미국이잖아.
Tell us
미국에서
in
뭐
the comments
자주포도
below.
그렇고 탱크도 그렇고 이럴 수죠 없죠. 심지어 자주포 우리나라 거 살까 이런 다짐도 하고 있다. 레일건 쓰는 거는 뭐 짜부러졌고 끝.